Caroline Gentry, I'm editor at Engerati, and here I have with me at Utility Week Live Darren Jones. He's a technology manager at ABB Power Grids. Did I say that right?
Yes, yeah? That's it. Yeah.
Okay, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Just wondering if you could just give us a quick rundown on what you're working on at the moment.
One of the most important things we're currently working on is a project with Imperial College in London, where ABB has donated a significant amount of equipment to create a digital substation lab within the Energy Futures lab at Imperial. And it's a close collaboration with the academics at Imperial. The digitalisation story is not really a technology story. It's really about the benefits and the value that it can deliver for our customers, but to be able to understand what the technology can do for our customers does become necessary to kind of build a living lab, and it's an environment, it's a hands-on environment for the students there. It's as much as a demonstration of ABB's technology, it's really supposed to be a hands-on student teaching facility for Imperial, and it will form part of the modules on their electrical engineering undergraduate course. So there's a whole range of equipment that we've installed there. There's also the enterprise software, because again, digitalisation, it's as much a story of the software as the hardware. It's really within the enterprise software systems that the value is generated, if you like, where the magic happens. Everyone's broadly aware of these issues now around big data. All the technology that we deploy for digitalisation, what that's really giving us access to is tremendous data sets that we've never had access to before. And perhaps a good example is in transformer management. We've had a situation since networks were built where transformers, over the past 50 or 60 years, they were managed by having an oil sample taken every 2 or 5 or 8 years, and the oil sample was analysed, looking for the dissolved gas, which could tell you the aging of the transformer, its health, the risk of failure. So what digitalisation allows us to do is move away from taking a spot check sample once every 5 years to putting these assets under constant surveillance 24 hours a day. And then what we're then able to do is, in the old system, we take samples and spot checks on asset behaviour and performance, and then judge that asset against a fleet of similar assets of a similar age and similar vintage and similar manufacturers. But in the world of digitalisation, we're able to gather a huge amount of data about the performance of individual assets. So we'll be able to develop specific asset management regimes based on that individual unique asset and its own individual requirements. So it allows us to take a much more granular approach to the way we manage assets. Lots of reasons for that, because the energy network, the electricity distribution network in the UK is getting older. It changes by a few percent a year. It's been built up over many, many years, but it's not going to change significantly now. The network we have and the assets that we have in the UK, in the ground and in the air, it's basically fixed now. So what we need to do to get the maximum life and performance and resilience and reliability from those assets is to develop much more specific and targeted asset management regimes that target individual assets on their own merits, rather than try and treat them as one of a mass of assets of the same type and age and vintage. So it's really, the digitalisation story needs to talk about the financial value that these approaches will create and deliver back to our customers. As much as technology features heavily in that story, it's not really a story of technology. It needs to be a story of value that it creates and delivers back to customers and asset owners.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about that the customers now have to be at the centre of the new market.
Well, absolutely. It's all about customers, and that's, big customers, small customers. We used to talk about, there was a point well made, I think, by the chairman of the Competition and Markets Authority, made a speech, I think his name's Lord Tyree, a speech a few weeks ago, and he was making the point that, in regards to most of the customers that are connected to UK networks are domestic customers, like you and I, but we're used to thinking about vulnerable customers being certain groups maybe of older people or less financially well-off people. But the point has been made that the new vulnerability is going to be people who don't have the time to engage with their energy supply, because energy costs are going to get higher. There's lots of new work and ideas about flexibility and people being able to engage with the electricity network in a new way, through peer-to-peer trading, blockchain, all these types of apps. These new types of digitally enabled customers are going to play an important role in supporting the operation of the network in the future. The DNOs moving to DSOs and buying flexibility, people who can switch loads on and off. There's a real danger people will get left behind. People don't have the time to engage with those new markets and that new flexibility. There's a real danger that they could be left behind in the future energy system. And as I say, the point's being made, they're not people who we've traditionally thought about as vulnerable customers. It could be all of us, basically. We're all time poor now. I certainly don't have the time to keep up with the things you get bombarded with every day. You just don't have the time to do everything you need to do. So, digitalisation, it's the other side of the coin, that it does bring risks of new vulnerabilities, where there's benefits, there's also risks, and we need to, as engineers, we all have an interest in the health and future vitality and viability of the electricity network. So, we all need to make sure that we're, aware of the new risks that may appear.
And what do you think Ofgem can do to try and encourage that?
Well, it's a really interesting period now in the industry. We've all been involved for many, many years. Things have never changed so quickly as they are changing now. I think we've got 13 or 14 gigawatts of solar energy connected onto just domestic rooftops, predominantly domestic rooftops in the UK. That was driven purely by feed-in tariffs and change to legislation. The solar panels that we can now see, you don't need to hear industry experts talking about this. Anyone can drive around and see this with their own eyes. Now you can see the changing energy landscape. That's been driven specifically by changes to the regulations that govern the way renewable energy is installed. So I think the big thing for the next couple of years is going to be the Rio ED2 price review and the transmission, the T2 price review as well. I think there's a real opportunity there. Ofgem are making some noises about wanting to see some pretty radical changes to the regulation around electricity networks, particularly from my background on the innovation side. We've had probably over 15 years now of innovation incentives. That's driven a huge change in the industry and a huge change to the companies. But I think the signals from Ofgem are now that they want to accelerate that change. And they want to see the electricity utilities, measured by the innovative solutions that they actually deliver into business as usual. So I think that's going to be, a really interesting time, just to see how far, Ofgem can't be too radical. These are very risk-averse businesses, very stable, long-term businesses owned by investors, shareholders. They need to remain healthy. But it's clear now that the change that's required, the net zero report from the Climate Change Commission that came out, I think a week or two ago, that they were, pretty radical and pretty clear in what they were saying is that, things have got to change in terms of the decarbonisation agenda, or not change, perhaps things have got to accelerate. We have to get the energy networks right, which I think we're in the process of doing, so we can then lead on to the decarbonisation of transport, which I think is moving along really well now. That's not just a nice to do. Everyone's well aware of the issues of air quality and air pollution in cities. Lots of local councils still own fleets of diesel buses. It's our understanding of the harm that those diesel particulate pollutants are causing to children is enhancing all the time. So the decarbonisation of transport, not just a nice to do. It's not about Teslas or the latest nice electric vehicle. It's actually a really serious public health issue, really serious, that we should all have a stake in being involved. And then the decarbonisation of domestic heating as well. There are lots of people, it's with cold houses in the winter, lots of people having to choose between heating a home or putting food on the table. You know, we've all got an interest in doing something about that situation. And it's the decarbonisation of the electricity network that are going to lead on to being able to handle, you know, that new load that will come along from the decarbonisation of heating. I think I read somewhere that during the Beast from the East a year or so ago, there was a 223 gigawatt maximum demand on the gas network. Well, in the next 10 years, the electricity network is going to have to potentially serve that demand during those extreme winter storm events, which we know again, it's projected that's going to happen even more often in the future. So there's a huge amount to do there. Me as a technology manager, I'm obviously have a love of technology and all those things, but you have to always bring it back to what it's really all about, which is about customers, people, and trying to serve society better by through engineering.
So a lot of work to do.
Lots to do, yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
Okay, my pleasure.